Kitco News special coverage of the Xplor convention is brought to you by Radisson Mining.
Hello, welcome to Kitco News. I'm Niels Christensen. Welcome to the Xplor Mining Conference in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Joining me right now is Eric Lemieux, mining analyst with EBL Consultants. Eric, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure.
We were supposed to talk in 2019, and then COVID happened and all of this stuff. So it's I'm excited to have you on the show. And as a mining analyst, I just Quebec is such an important district in the mining sector, in the global mining sector. And I just the first question I wanted to ask you is what's your take on mineralization in the Quebec sector, and the health of the junior exploration sector?
Well, you're right, Neil. When I started off my career, or part of my career as a mining analyst with Laurentian Bank Securities, it was my selling card. I came from Quebec, and kudos to the Quebec government with its ministry of promoting Quebec's mineral endowment. They were very proactive. We've got a great data bank, and you had the Plan Nord that was sort of starting off. Quebec had fiscal incentives. Quebec had a part of the government which, because I guess our specificity, where we always want to be sort of independent from Canada, this duplication of the ministries. They had the Quebec House in New York City, they had a Quebec House in London. So they had this promotional side. And so they did a very good promotion on Quebec, both in terms of the mining potential, the regime stability in part, but the fiscal regime. So yeah, I mean, Quebec, was, when you went around the world, people said, well, Quebec is a very good jurisdiction. And we saw it with the Fraser Institute rankings, where Quebec was rated not always the first, but always in the top 10 for a long period of time.
We'll get into those a little bit more, but yeah, because I'm really interested to get your thoughts on where we are right now as well, because we have fallen in the Fraser Institute.
Well, Neil, that's what I was going to say, is that today I'm a little bit embarrassed when I say I come from Quebec, and it's unfortunate because it's 180 degrees change. And this in part because it's nice to be making the promotion and selling, all the beauty part of what you are. But when you can't follow up on what you promise, eventually people say, well, you know what, Quebec was nice, but the was is there. And I give examples where, we stopped the uranium industry here in Quebec, put a moratorium. We did the same thing with the CAQ government, the most recently elected CAQ government, the CAQIS, where they said no to the exploration and development of hydrocarbon, oil and gas. And so when you look at that from afar, you say, well, look, you're promoting your mineral endowment, at the same time you're closing off certain elements. Is very dangerous. So that's been in the last 10 years, and I find that most unfortunate. And sometimes I find them, they're very scared to defend their industry, and they don't go up to the barricades. So I find it too bad. Now, to get to your initial question about the mineralization, well, I still think Quebec is very well endowed. We're very lucky because we're basically got 6 big lithotectonic domains that make it that Quebec, by de facto, just by the fact that you've got different types of geology, is well endowed, and that's very lucky. I mean, there's very few provinces in Canada that have that mineral endowment because of that geological inheritance, and so Quebec is very lucky in that regards.
So I guess so. You're not surprised then that Quebec has fallen. So we were 4th, now we're 6th in the Fraser Institute. But is it okay? Is it okay to pick and choose what minerals the province should be developing, or do you just want to see the entire offering?
I'm afraid when you start to pick and choose, because sometimes it's a decision based at the moment, based on external stuff, and sometimes it can be a good call, but sometimes in the long term it can be a bad call. And I give the example of uranium.
I was going to say uranium. That's got to be a very bad call right now.
I think when we look at what's going on today, I think it's reemerging. I'm not an uranium specialist, but I'm smart enough to know that in the baggages of stuff to secure our economies, we probably do need nuclear. And so, to say that you stopped all exploration and development, when maybe you had a good potential to develop, and all the fact that it's wealth creation, that we could now be positioned to say, hey, look, we've got some interesting projects, and we could be re-attracting different players, and all the more that as a government you can put certain parameters. So not open bar, but say, look, we're open to that commodity, nevertheless, but be aware that if you come and explore for uranium in Quebec, you'll have to satisfy this criteria. So I think it's a missed opportunity, unfortunately, and explains why we've been going down, I think, the Fraser ranking. Now, are we going to go back? I shouldn't say go back. Are we going to go down, below the 25? I don't think so, but we just got to be cognizant that eventually, both for people who are working here in the province of Quebec, will say that we'll see or will perceive that the government is being a hypocrite. You're promoting, your lips are saying something, but your legs or your feet are not going in that direction. So that, I think, is the risk that I think more and more we're seeing in these, I would say, last 5 years.
Because it's really interesting because 3 years ago we wouldn't have a conversation about critical minerals. We wouldn't have a conversation about graphite exploration in Quebec or lithium, or we wouldn't but now it's growing. Quebec for 100 years, Quebec has been known as a precious metals jurisdiction. We've mined gold and silver for the last 100 years in the Abitibi area.
For sure, the critical and strategic metals are la saveur du jour, if I could use the French expression. They're the flavor of the month, and that doesn't mean that it's negative. It's not a negative expression I'm saying there. But we did have graphite mining in Quebec. We have a history of graphite mining. Lac des Îles, which is owned by a French company called Imeris, was a success story. And it's in the middle of the Laurentians, and people are not necessarily aware of it. And I kind of find it funny because when I hear people that are against mining, I say, well, did you know, by the way, that we have a graphite mine that's been mining for the last 25 years, and there hasn't been any ecological disaster? To the contrary, there's been expertise that has been built, and there's been a return to the local community in terms of wealth creation. So that is something that has to be accounted for. We had back in the 60s, we had a lithium mine. The ones now that are Sayona that has taken over was actually exploited back in the 1960s, Quebec Lithium. And it was, I wouldn't say a home run in terms of a success story, but it was nevertheless created some expertise and some wealth. It became repopular back in 2012 when the lithium craze. But then unfortunately, and this is where I think we could bring the debate, is about expertise, the quality of management. And I think it's something as an analyst I look at. I think it's important. Beyond the commodity, is to know who are the people behind that, and do they have the expertise to be able to develop it.
Well, I was going to say, so you've worked for Laurentian Bank. I mean, you build portfolios of mining companies. What do you mean by that? So what do you look for? As a mining analyst, a lot of people say location. Others say location but management, and other people you want management that has a good track record. What are the things that you look at then?
Well, tongue in cheek, when I joined Laurentian Bank in 2008, I remember when I was having the interview with the big VP, or I should say, it wasn't a president, but it was a big executive VP, and we had lunch, and he asked me, Eric, when you're looking at a company, what's the most important criterias? And here I had my little hamster rolling in my head, and I was trying to get these notions about accounting and finance, and the ratio of this, and I came out with some sort of real financial answer, and he laughed and he said, management. And I said, whoa, yeah, but it's true. I think it's the quality of management. I think it's one of the most important things. Location also, but the quality of management. And so to get back to my comment about expertise, well, I think in this day and age, you need a wide gamut of expertise. Obviously, you got to have the technical expertise in your team to the commodity or whatever you're looking for. And then also in terms of where the project is in terms of its mineral development stage. If you're covering the whole basis, well, it's good to have good exploration people, but it's also good to have maybe some development people who are able to say, okay, well, maybe our criteria, we need sort of this sort of threshold. And it's not always bad to have some guy who has a little bit of production expertise to be able to say, well, on the production side, we'll have to have this eventually take into account. So, it's all a question about expertise and then a balance of people to have the financial acumen also to be able, because it's nice to be able to explore, but if you want to explore, you need the money. And if you don't have people who are able to raise money at the right moment, at the right conditions, well, you're sort of stuck in the ground. So I think it's a whole spectrum of stuff that you need in your team. And that's why when I look at a management team, I want to make sure that they've got the expertise, but expertise on different facets. And also on the board of directors. It's good to have a diverse board of directors. That also, and more is something where the ESG, the governance, the social aspects, the environmental aspects, yes, I think is something important. But what I realized, to get back to the Quebec government, we do have stringent parameters. We do have to go through a BAP, any project, which is a real environmental assessment that is very profound and very deep, and that people can go up and ask their questions. And I do appreciate that element where the local population have their say on that. And I think that's very important. And once it's be able to have people voice their opinions, voice their discomfort, if the issuer cannot respond to that, well, the government can say, well, we don't accept your project. And I think that's fair enough. And we've seen some in Quebec here where the BAP had a negative review. And either they let the company go back and correct stuff, or they totally said no. And that's part of the game, if you want.
Well, and I guess that makes, but that's what you have to do. If you want to be a world-class jurisdiction, you have to have standards. But I guess what you're saying is, there should be standards, but it should be open to everything. And I just sort of wonder, as we develop these critical metals, are you worried that the government's going to come in and say, well, no, we don't like lithium,
for example. That's my fear. That's why, to answer your question, I prefer that we open all the commodities, because if you start to cherry pick stuff, there's a danger. Who knows in 20 years from now if for commodity YXZ turns out to be the commodity that is important for development of society, and that we're very well endowed in that, but the government decided 20 years ago to say no to it for whatever considerations. There's a risk at that. We were talking about uranium earlier on. I understand part of the historical reasons why uranium was discounted. It was something where perhaps the most advanced project at the time, they maybe didn't start off right. Yeah. And they didn't make social acceptability one of the first priorities. And that was an error of them. And I can confess that as an analyst, I covered that a little bit. I told management that you made an error in that, or I maybe realized that effectively it's a bit like a train. You got the railway going in that direction. If you don't take care of the situation, you can't make any corrections. You can't turn 90 degrees at a snap of a finger. And so that was disheartening. I understand the Cree have been refractory to that. At the same time, they accepted the diamond project, the Stornoway project. Now you'll say that diamonds are less nefarious as opposed to yellow cake, but I still think that there was an opportunity to develop the Matoush project not too far from the Mistassini community, but far enough that I don't think it was going to be any dangers. And I actually saw it as actually an enterprise where by mining the uranium and by cleaning the cleaning process, they were actually going to clean the lake that was nearby. And so it was going to actually be a cleaning operation in the long term. And I remember saying that to the people at the Kaiser Depot. And I remember the lady was very shocked, but I said, that's the truth. It was going to be a cleaning operation. And it was important that the government sets the highest standards. But as you know, nuclear is controlled by the federal government. So you had all that federal jurisdiction. I was going to say can do, but I don't think it's can do. I forgot the name of the Canadian Nuclear Agency. Anyways, long story short, they had their say. And when they saw the project and they did an analysis, they were for it. And they put the highest standards. And so that project was able to go through there. But I understand the First Nations had issues, fair enough. But I put the blame on management that did not take care of that. And so that's history, and so we'll live with it.
Which is, and I guess this is why ESG now is so important. I mean, you can't, that social license
is the most important thing. Yeah. Today, I'm an old generation guy. When I was doing my undergrad, it was not a notion that we even talked about. And today I have to confess, it's one of the most important nations, and fair enough. And we'll build the stuff around that. What I ask on the other side is that I don't want them to exaggerate too much in terms of their demands, and that at least respect the science. And I think that's fundamental. When the science says that this is the conclusion we can have, insofar that the science is not always perfect, but in this day and age, I think we have to respect the science. And so I have issues when people come and say, well, they're against this project for X reasons, but it's not supported by the science. And we see that. And it's supported by disinformation. And that, I think, is this is the dangerous that I see we're slipping to. And to get back to the Quebec notion, this is why I think Quebec has to be perhaps more proactive to say sometimes, oh, we gave you the license. You've got the social license. Because of whatever reasons, there's some people that are against this at this day and age, that they're able to say, hey, hold on. What you are now asking for is exaggerated, and we've got to put you to the side. And this project can really go ahead, and we'll do everything in the government to promote that.
So just switching gears a little bit, where do you see the most potential? Is it in critical metals? Is it in gold and precious metals? 100 years of, do you ignore 100 years of history to focus on, this energy transition? What companies do you like? Do you like the gold companies, or do you?
I was just on a panel just before coming to join you, on the critical metals and strategic metals, and I voiced the opinion that I still believe that gold is not popular right now. But I'm a contrarian, and so when you're a contrarian, you see an opportunity. And I think gold now is an opportunity, because it's neglected. It's seen no more as a store of wealth, and I don't think that's too much. That's not fair, or it's not going to be the case for a very long time, in my humble opinion. Now, having said that, gold has a history, and in Quebec it has a history of mining, and successful mining. So I still think we'll have a lingering potential of seeing gold mining projects, be popular in Quebec and see all the way to fruition. Now, having said that, obviously, I think Quebec, because of its mineral endowment, will have certain new commodities or base metal commodities that might be of interest in the coming decades or coming years. But I like to talk about decades because I'm aware also now the fact that from discovery, it takes a minimum of 10 years to do the development, to do all the studies, and to go into production. There's a duplicity where now you can see that as being negative, but at the same time, quality projects take time to build. And so I think we have to now realize that, a decade-long process is going to be the new reality, and be able to live with it.
Yeah. Well, and if we do, like, again, short-term gain, like if we reduce the red tape, I guess, is that more work that we have to do ESG, like on the ESG front? Like, I agree with you. I think maybe, a decade is going to be the new normal because people want to see the due diligence.
Yeah. I mean, there's some things I think we can find in terms of the red tape. There's certain things that I think I can see now in the government that they're realizing that maybe we shouldn't be too stringent on certain stuff, and that we maybe can shorten the time span, or maybe there's certain synergies in terms of what can be accepted as in terms of studies. So I think life is always is a mutation, is an evolution, and I think we're going to find a fair balance eventually. All the more realization that there is a supply constraints, and if we want to go into the green economy, we're going to have to be now aware that we can't apply, or we cannot be saying no to too much stuff. Eventually, we're going to have to realize that we're going to have to accept that we can mine in our backyard. And I think this is where I developed the notion of NIMBY, not in my backyard. Well, I think there's ways of telling people, well, look, at anywhere in the world you go, you're in somebody's backyard. If I go in Greenland, the Greenlandic people, they have their say on their territory, and in their ways of life, their backyard is very expansive, but it's normal because to survive, they have to have access to the shoreline, the sea, the fish, for the warmth. Now, they don't necessarily heat with wood because there's not, Greenland doesn't necessarily have the forests or at least maybe in the past they had, but long story short is that we have to be aware that that perspective of backyard for certain people can be very, very expansive. And so when local developed areas say, well, we don't want it in our backyard, I say to them, well, hold on, anywhere in the world, if you don't want it over here, it's going to have to be built somewhere far away. But that far away, you're in somebody's backyard. And if you respect all nations of the world, you're going to have respect for that person to say, well, I don't necessarily agree with that. And is it fair that we go develop in Africa some of our, and I don't want to use the word dirty mines, but the Chinese go and do it. They go and mine it. They bring it back to China, transform it. They do transformation. They send back the end product here in North America, and we buy it. Is it necessarily fair that we cannot produce it locally? And I think we're going to see a resurgence of people want to say, well, we want to control the chain of custody, and we want to control the chain of production, and that eventually there may be a premium to be able to produce closer to home.
Do you think Quebec can be a leader in that?
I think eventually, I hope so. I know we have the mineral endowment to do it. I think we do have the civil servant apparatus, technostructure to be able to move forward with that and move forward in a very intelligent way, because we have the expertise, we have the environmental governance, the thresholds, the parameters, and we have the experience, for better or for worse. We've got bad experience, and I think from bad experience you must learn some lessons, both the industry and both the government, and so maybe we'll be able to be at the forefront. And I look on the financial side, nevertheless with the Quebec Inc., for the better or for worse, the Quebec Inc. has been very constructive, is something that is very much appreciated in the industry. I know that sometimes on the financial industry side, sometimes they'll say, well, it's unfair and it's unfair competition. But I think in the scope of things, that Quebec Inc. is a contributor to the mineral development, and it's something that Quebec, when you put everything together, will be able to be a leader. And we've been a leader in certain stuff. Like I said initially, it's kind of too bad that we've closed off our uranium industry, because we had expertise. We had a power station, nuclear power station at Gentilly in Bécancour. I had the chance, and maybe on a more personal level, I hunt on the St. Lawrence Seaway. Part of the scenery I see is the old nuclear power station. But I wasn't afraid to be there, and I visited it. And all I can say is that Hydro-Quebec had a top-of-the-line expertise in nuclear. And they, I believe, had a nuclear industry that was next to none. And they were using strategic parameters. And I find it very too bad that we, with the PQ government, that we closed that industry. We lost expertise. Some of these engineers went off to work in other countries. Some of the mechanical people, the hand users, the plumbers, the electricians, very highly experts, developed a very narrow minded expert, but they were world renowned. A plumber was world renowned because the plumbing system of the nuclear reactors was difficult. But I knew some people that had that expertise, developed through acumen, developed through experience, developed by the Hydro-Quebec affirmation. And so I find it too bad that we lost that.
But like you say, maybe we learn from the experiences and we can...
Exactly. So maybe the next time we do reboot a potential nuclear industry, well, we'll learn to appreciate the expertise we develop, and that, as we say, it's in French, c'est à la prochaine. And so that's going to be...
Well, that's a good way to end it. Until next time. Eric, thank you very much for coming on the show and giving us your insights. It's been a fascinating conversation.
And it was a pleasure. I know sometimes I ruffle feathers with some of my opinion, but I think in this day and age, it's important to have an opinion. It's important to be able to express an opinion. And I think in life you have to be able to accept diverse spectrum of opinions. And then, what ultimately comes in to be the mainstream or the main opinion of the jour, well, we have to respect it, but cognizant that it can change. And when science comes with something new to say, well, we've been maybe going through the wrong direction, as a society, be able to say, well, we can retract and go back to whatever corrections we have to make. So anyways, it was fun to be able to chat. And, I think Quebec, to answer your initial question, I think Quebec, as you see here in the conference, has its little specificity where we're a little bit different, and maybe sometimes we can be different in a very positive way and be knowledgeable and be a world class basin of expertise and development, hopefully. Pleasure again.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for watching Kitco News. Stay tuned for more coverage from the Xplor Mining Conference.
Kitco News special coverage of the Xplor Convention is brought to you by Radisson Mining.